I don't think it's 1 or 3. So let me just double check and then I'll lock in on which one I want to look at first. Well, actually, before I do that, you guys decide first. I'm going to have you work on it on your own first. Where are we? Here? No. This one, yeah. All right. You guys decide which paragraph you think makes the most sense to look in first. And walk through this process. Go through our method, see if you can find evidence, and once you've found evidence, see which answer choice you think is correct. If there's no evidence in the first place you look, you're going to have to go to the next paragraph. You may even have to look at 3 paragraphs. I think we kind of agree that 1 and 3 are not likely, but we may have to check 2, 4, and 5 just to be safe if we can't find it on our first attempt. So go ahead. Identify which paragraph you want to look in first, look for that evidence, try to match it with an answer choice. When you think you have the correct answer, unpause and I will reveal the correct answer. I am going to cheat a little bit here because I know what the correct answer is. I don't blame you at all if you looked in a different paragraph first. I think 2, 4, or 5 could have the correct answer. I know what the correct answer is, though. I have an answer key, so I'm going to look in 5 first. Because I have an answer key, and I know that's the answer. So, the Protestants of Ireland are political Protestants, that is, Protestants by reason of their participation in political power. This quote best supports the argument made in which of the following paragraphs? Condemn me elsewhere as much as you please, but this you must admit. You may taunt the ministry with having coalesced me. You may raise the vulgar cry of Irishmen and Papists against me. You may send out men called ministers of God to slander and calumniate me. They may assume whatever garb they please, but the question comes into this narrow compass. I respectfully insist on equal justice for Ireland, on the same principle by which it administered to Scotland and England. I will not take less. Refuse me that if you can. We do have a footnote here, and it tells us that this is a derogatory term for a Catholic. So the idea here that they are Protestants by their reason of their participation in political power fits here in the sense that, it talks about Protestants talking about like religion, right? Catholic is talking about religion. But they're saying that like regardless of that, right? It's kind of the emphasis on you can say whatever you want about my religion, about me being Irish, about me being Catholic, about, whatever else. You can taunt the ministry, blah, 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 blah. You can do whatever with your ministers of God. But without, regardless of all that, I demand on equal justice for Ireland on the same principle by which it has been administered to Scotland and Ireland. I will not take less. Refuse me that if you can. Because of their political demands, right? He's kind of saying it doesn't matter about the religious stuff or the cultural stuff, right? We deserve the same, because of the same principles, we deserve the same rights as Scotland and England. So the Protestants of Ireland are political Protestants, that is, Protestants by reason of their participation in political power. The people in Ireland that are Protestants because they want the power, I guess. It's not, this is a difficult question for sure. That is the correct answer here, and that's kind of how this question type works, right? We're trying to match outside information with something related to the passage. If we look at our other paragraphs here, there is nothing about religion at all mentioned in the other 2 places that we talked about. Let me just quickly double check here, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So the only one where it would really fit would be kind of this last one. Tough question, but hopefully the method is sound here. whole passage questions are our final umbrella category of reading questions. Within them, there's a couple different types of whole passage questions, but there are some common rules for whole passage questions in general. With whole passage questions, you want to consider the entire passage to answer the question. So it's not just looking at a specific part like we've been doing up until this point. We need to understand what's going on in the entire passage to answer it. We may need to reread multiple parts of the passage. We may need to find evidence in multiple parts of the passage. And our active reading is really going to come in handy here. This is why essentially the active reading is so important, because of these whole passage questions. The active reading and our understanding that we have from that will help us identify that evidence, will help us kind of already have an idea of what evidence we're looking for and where certain things are mentioned. If we didn't do the active reading, if we didn't have a complete understanding of the passage, these questions would be very, very difficult to find evidence for. I mentioned there are a couple different types of whole passage questions. We have central purpose or exigence questions. We have tone, attitude, theme, or sentiments questions. And we have whole passage comprehension. And like we said, right, for all of these, we still need to find evidence. It's just that we might have to find evidence from multiple different places. We'll start with central purpose or exigence questions first. And like the name implies, they ask us to identify the main purpose of the entire passage, or the purpose element of the rhetorical situation. This is something you should have already asked yourself as part of the active reading strategy, right? I think I actually forgot to do it the last time we did the active reading, which is my bad. But those last two questions we ask, right? What is the purpose? What is the message? That's the same thing that a central purpose question will ask about. We want to know what the author's trying to achieve. Are they trying to persuade, explain, inform, argue, entertain, describe, right? I don't know. Any other verb that they might be doing. And the way to identify this question type, they are going to either ask about central purpose, they're going to ask about exigence, or they're going to ask what the author's reason for writing is. Now, central purpose and exigence are slightly different. We have very slightly different methods for solving them. If it asks about central purpose, it's similar to underlying purpose, except that it's talking about the entire passage, not just like one little specific part. We can still use our verb scanning. And we want to ask ourselves when we're looking through our answer choices, does every part of the passage support this purpose? Is there evidence in the beginning, middle, and end of the passage that suggests that the author is writing for this purpose, right? Is this the central purpose, or is this one small purpose? We want the central purpose. Exigence is the same thought process, except that the answer choices will be about the situation that prompted the author to write for his or her purpose. That's what exigence means. It's like what happened that caused the writer to want to write this. So, for example, if the writer is writing about slavery and about how they want to abolish slavery, their purpose might be to persuade their audience that slavery should be abolished. The exigence would be the fact that slavery still exists, right? The exigence is the thing that prompted them to write. So it's the same thought process, except that the way that the answer choices are formatted will be a little bit different because it's about the situation that prompted the author to write, not about the purpose itself. And the other difference with exigence is that we can't use the verb scanning. So let's do some practice. This is a passage we've seen before, but we haven't done our active reading for. So I am going to have you guys try that out. Do the active reading here. And then once you've done your active reading, try to answer the question. Take as much time as you need. Unpause when you're done. Okay. For the sake of time, I am not going to do the active reading here. I trust that you guys, after, we've practiced it a couple of times, I trust that you guys are pretty good at it. If you're not, you can kind of go back and maybe rewatch some of the ones we've done, because the process is going to be the same for all of them. So I'm going to trust you guys that you did a good job here. Instead of doing the active reading, I'm just going to go through this and scan for the evidence here. Again, just for the sake of time, not because this is the best strategy. You guys have already done the active reading. You've already found the evidence, and you've already chosen an answer point at this point. If you an answer choice, yeah, at this point. If you haven't done that already, pause again and do all that. Okay. So the question wants to know which of the following is most likely the reason why the author delivered this speech to the United Nations. I have come this evening to talk with you on one of the greatest issues of our time. That is the preservation of human freedom. So right away, there is some evidence, right? They want to preserve human freedom. I've chosen to discuss it here in France at the Sorbonne because here in the soil, the roots of human freedom have long ago stuck deep, and here they may have been richly nourished. It was here that the Declaration of the Rights of Man was proclaimed, and the great slogans of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, fired the imagination of men. I've chosen to discuss this issue in Europe because this has been the scene of the greatest historic battles between freedom and tyranny. So let me pause for a second here. We kind of read this area for an underlying purpose question earlier, right? And we determined that the purpose of them talking about the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the French Revolution was to kind of give examples about why they chose to give it in France, among other things. That's all relevant to the underlying purpose of something specific, but it's not relevant to our central purpose, right? The central purpose of this passage is not that she wanted to give a speech in France. The central purpose has something to do with the preservation of human freedom, right? We'll get more evidence to find exactly what. But this is all reasons why she did something, but it's not reasons why she's giving this speech in the first place. Just a little aside there, to kind of show the difference between underlying purpose and central purpose. We must not be confused about what freedom is. Basic human rights are simple and easily understood. Freedom of speech and a free press, freedom of religion and worship, freedom of assembly and the right of petition, the right of men to be secure in their homes and free from unreasonable search and seizure and from arbitrary arrest and punishment. We must not be deluded by the efforts of the forces of reaction to corrupt the great words of our free tradition. Wow, those are terrible underlines. We must not be deluded by the efforts of the forces of reaction to corrupt the great words of our free tradition and thereby to confuse the struggle. There are basic differences that show up even in the use of words between a democratic and a totalitarian country. For example, democracy means one thing to the USSR and another thing to the USA, and I know in France. I have served since the first meeting of the Nuclear Commission on the Human Rights Commission, and I think this point stands out clearly. The USSR representatives assert that they already have achieved many things which we, in what they call the bourgeois democracies, cannot achieve because their government controls the accomplishment of these things. Our government seems powerless to them. In the last analysis, it is controlled by the people. They would not put it that way. They would say that the people in the USSR control their government by allowing their government to have certain absolute rights. We, on the other hand, feel that certain rights can never be granted to the government, but must be kept in the hands of the people. I think the best example one can give of this basic difference and the use of terms is the right to work. The Soviet Union insists that is a basic right which it alone can guarantee because it alone provides full employment by the government. But the right to work in the Soviet Union means the assignment of workers to do whatever task is given to them by the government without an opportunity for the people to participate in the decision that the government should do this. A society in which everyone works is not necessarily a free society and may indeed be a slave society. On the other hand, a society in which there is a widespread economic insecurity can turn freedom into a barren and vapid right for millions of people. We in the United States have come to realize it means freedom to choose one's job, to work or not work as one desires. We in the United States have come to realize, however, that people have a right to demand that their government will not allow them to starve because, as individuals, they cannot find work of the kind they are accustomed to doing, and this is a decision brought about by public opinion which came as a result of the Great Depression. In which many people were out of work, but we would not consider in the United States that we had gained any freedom if we were compelled to follow a dictatorial assignment to work where and when we were told. The right of choice would seem to us an important fundamental freedom. The place to discuss the issue of human rights is in the form of the United Nations. The United Nations has been set up as the common meeting ground for nations where we can consider together our mutual problems and take advantage of our differences in experience. It is now, as always, our hope that despite the wide differences in the world, in approach we face in the world today, we can, with mutual good faith in the principles of the United Nations Charter, arrive at a common basis of understanding. Okay. So, what is the central purpose here? Well, they talk about freedom and preserving human freedom. They talk about the difference between, human rights and people have different definitions for different words. They give this whole example about how things are different in the USSR versus the USA. And then they come to this conclusion that we need to all work together. So what is the central purpose here? Well, the central purpose is to kind of convince people to work together, right? To convince people to kind of come to a common basis of understanding, to create some universal rights, some basic human freedoms for all countries to follow. And the sum of all of our evidence tells us that, right? It's not just one place, it's the sum of all of our evidence that's we found everywhere in here. So let's take a look at our options. And our verb scanning can help us here. They don't start with verbs, but she was advocating, wished to affirm, wished to assert her power, wished to counteract, wished to surrender. Can we eliminate any of these right away? Well, was advocating, she could be advocating for something. Wished to affirm, yeah, she could be trying to affirm something. Wished to assert her power. That one I think we can eliminate right away. Nowhere in here is she trying to assert her power, right? She's trying to convince people to come together. Wished to counteract, I'm leaning kind of against that, but there are some instances where she could be trying to counteract something, right? Maybe she's trying to counteract individualism or some, I don't know, something like that. And she wished to surrender. I think that one we could also get rid of right away. She's not surrendering anything. So I think we kind of narrow it down to three options here. She was advocating for the creation of universal standards of human rights by the members of the United Nations. That right away seems like a perfect answer choice. It fits with everything that we identified, right? It fits with the fact that she wants to preserve human freedom. It fits with the fact that there are basic human rights, and we must not be confused about what it is. It talks about how people have different definitions in different countries for things, and then it fits with this idea that we all need to come together for a common basis of understanding. So A seems really good. B, she wished to affirm the United Nations' continuing commitment to the defense of human rights in all its member nations. Not bad. Actually, pretty okay. She wished to affirm the United Nations' continuing commitment to the defense of human rights in all of its member nations. Yes. However, it seems like she's not just trying to affirm something. She is trying to get the United Nations to take additional action, right? It is now, as always, our hope that despite wide differences, we can, in mutual good faith, arrive at a common basis of understanding, right? She's not trying to just continue something. She's trying to kind of push it in a new direction, create something new. So B is really tempting, but I think A is a little bit better. D, D, she wished to counteract the Soviet influence on standards of human rights in the United States. No. The only reason she brings up the Soviets, right, is to show that different countries have different ideas, and we need to create one kind of conceptual, like, common idea, common basis of understanding. So, yeah, A is going to be our correct answer here. We have another practice, and this one asks about exigence. It's a passage we've already looked at a whole bunch, the one about Ireland and British Parliament, House of Commons. Go ahead and work on this one by yourself first. You probably don't need to do the active reading again because we've already done it here. We've done it multiple times for this passage, but if you lost it somehow and you can't look back to the math that you made, you can do it again. Give it your best shot. Try to come to a correct answer. Unpause when you're done. Which of the following best describes the writer's exigence in the passage? Again, I'm not going to re-go through this entire passage. We've looked at it so many different times. Just as a refresher, right? And again, we do need evidence, but I don't want to go through the entire thing again. Again, this video is longer than I wanted it to be. So I will just kind of point out some things. The question is whether we mean to do justice to Ireland. England never did do justice to Ireland. He talks about, I respectfully insist on equal justice for Ireland on the same principle by which it administered to Scotland and England. Talks about how, those are kind of the big ones. There's probably some more in there. It talks about how everyone else kind of turned them away, right? Where does it talk about? We begged as we would for a beggar's boon. We asked for emancipation. And I remember how my speech and the person were treated when I had no opportunity of reply. Essentially, it seems to be that he really wants emancipation for Ireland, right? And what is the exigence? What is causing him to write for this purpose or to speak for this purpose? Because it's a speech, it's an address. What is causing this? Well, if he is trying to get justice for Ireland, presumably what's causing him to write this, and from all of the evidence, right, especially right over here, is this idea that Ireland is not being treated fairly. The exigence is that Ireland is not free, is not being treated justly. See if any of the answer choices match that. A, the lack of interest among members of the British Parliament to consider the rights of Irish people under common law. That is mentioned. I guess, let's hold on to it for now. B, a growing Irish nationalism in rebellion to British rule. No, it doesn't tell us that Irish nationalism is growing. It doesn't say that there's more rebellion now than there was later. It just says that Ireland's not being treated fairly and they want to be treated fairly, so it's not B. C, the need for equal justice for the citizens of Ireland under British rule. Yeah, that seems really good. Let's hold on to that. D, widening disparities between the wealthy and the poor in Ireland. That is never mentioned. D, Irish resentment of heavy taxation under British rule. Also never mentioned. It's either A or C here. Lack of interest among members of the British Parliament to consider the rights of Irish people under common law, or the need for equal justice for the citizens of Ireland under British rule. It does say that he's going to these people because other people have ignored him. However, the bigger reason he is giving this speech is because he wants equal justice. And the need for equal justice is what's motivating him to give this speech. So C is going to be the correct answer. We're almost done. I know this is a little longer. It's a little over 2 hours right now. I apologize about that. I did say there was a lot of content we had to cover. Tone, attitude, theme, or sentiments questions. I'll try to get through this as quickly as we can. For these questions, we have to identify the tone or attitude of the passage, or identify what the tone or attitude suggests about the passage, or identify which answer choice is most similar to the tone, attitude, theme, or sentiments of the passage. I've kind of lumped all of these together because they're very similar, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit. To identify this question type, they'll use one of these words. They'll either ask about the tone, the attitude, the theme, or the sentiments in the question. Pretty easy to identify. For tone or attitude, they are technically different terms, but for the purposes of the multiple choice section of this test, they can be treated as the same. They both refer to the way that the author conveys ideas and the way that he or she feels about the topic that he or she is writing about. So, yeah, tone and attitude for this test, for the multiple choice section, they're the same. To answer these questions, you're going to look for hints throughout the passage, right? These are whole passage questions that suggest how the author feels about the topic. You're going to look for emotional words, the adjectives that the author chooses to use to describe the topic, and their purpose or exigence will also have some influence on their tone or attitude, right? If we look at all right, let's say they're writing about slavery, right? And they want slavery abolished, but it's currently a thing and it's affecting them, right, bad. And their purpose is to kind of persuade people to abolish slavery. We can assume from that their tone or attitude, it's not even necessarily an assumption, we can kind of draw from that their tone or attitude might be angry or sad, right? It definitely wouldn't be positive. They definitely wouldn't have a positive tone. It would be something negative. So those are kind of the hints that we can use to help us figure out tone or attitude. We want to choose the answer choice that best matches all of the hints that we've identified. And if a question asks what the tone or attitude suggests, rather than just what is the tone or attitude, it's essentially asking you to identify the tone and the message, and to select the answer choice that accurately expresses both of them. So back to that slavery example, if the tone is angry, the message would be, and the message is that like slavery needs to be abolished, right? Then what the tone or attitude suggests would be that the tone suggests that he is angry, that slavery hasn't been abolished, right? Something like that. Let's try it out. The speaker's attitude towards the audience can best be described as what? Speaking of slavery, I didn't even realize, but this passage is about slavery. The speaker's attitude toward the audience can best be described as what? Go ahead, active read, all of that, look for hints, and see if you can find the correct answer. On pause when you're done. Okay. Again, I'm just going to go through this as quickly as I can because this is longer than I intended. A master is one to speak the vocabulary claims, then he does. The law gives him human work, flog him, kill him. The slave is a human being. Divested of all rights, reduced to the level of brute, a mere chattel in the eye of law. Is a name with the recording angel. Horses, sheep, swine, the law. The slave has no wife, no child, no country. He toils, he labors. We are sometimes told. Interesting. Okay. More than 20 years of my life, my childhood was environed with the painful. I grew up to manhood, not as an L-specter, not as the guest of a slaveholder, but as a slave. In consideration of these facts, I feel that I have a right to speak and to speak strongly. Yet, my friends, I feel bound to speak truly. So, yet kind of implies that he's not speaking strongly, right? This is really important here. He is directly saying that he is not speaking strongly. Strongly being like angrily, aggressively, right? He does not, he feels like he has the right to speak strongly, but he's not. Instead, he is just going to speak truthfully. There was that sneeze I talked about like an hour ago. Finally came. That's a big hint here. And if we go on, right, we can kind of see that, yeah, he doesn't seem to be angry, right? He's not aggressive. He's not, kind of cursing the people that enslaved him. He's just kind of explaining what's going on. I will state, as well as I can, the legal and social relation of the slave and master. A master is one, to speak in the vocabulary of the southern states, who claims and exercises a right of property in the person of a fellow man. Even the way he describes a slave owner here, right, isn't rude, isn't mean, isn't aggressive. It's just explaining, right? He does with the force of the law and the sanction of southern religion. So he actually even goes on to defend the slave owner a little bit by saying that the law allows them to do this and religion also allows them to do this. He may work him, flog him, hire him out, sell him, and in certain contingencies kill him with perfect impunity. The slave is a human being, divested of all rights, reduced to the level of a brute, a mere chattel in the eyes of the law, placed beyond the circle of human brotherhood, cut off from his kind, his name. He is inserted in a master's ledger with horses, sheep, and swine. In the law, the slave has no wife, no children, no country, and no home. He can own nothing, possess nothing, blah, 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 blah. It's very descriptive, right? It's just kind of calmly describing how everything works. We are sometimes told the contentment of the slaves and are entertained with vivid pictures of their happiness. We are told they often dance and sing, that their masters frequently give them wherewith to make merry, and find that they have little of which to complain. I admit that the slave does sometimes sing, dance, and appear to be merry. But what does this prove? It only proves to my mind that though slavery is armed with 1,000 stings, it is not able to entirely to kill the elastic spirit of the bondman. Okay, so everything seems to fit with this, right? He feels he has the right to speak strongly, but instead he's just going to speak truthfully, right? He's only going to kind of explain how things work and be honest. And with that in mind, right, he is not condescending, not conspiratorial, not irreverent. And to be honest with you, I don't know what convivial means. I'll look it up for you right now, but this will happen sometimes. Cheerful, jovial, friendly, lively, enjoyable. Okay, yeah. That's a little bit too positive. B is the only one left. Amicable, which means like friendly, right? Calm, something like that. And yeah, it fits. He's being nice, right? That's essentially what it means. And that's the correct answer. In the case, like I just had, where you're given like 4 options like this, or 5 options, and you don't know what some of the words mean, skip them and make a decision based on everything else. If you know a word and you think that it's good, go with the one that you know. If you know that all of the words that you're familiar with are wrong, then you can kind of guess between the ones that you don't know. But yeah, B is correct here. My voice is starting to go. Theme or sentiments questions are similar. It's the same process. The only difference is to find the theme or sentiments, you are essentially combining the tone or attitude with the topic. So if the tone is angry and the topic is slavery, the sentiments or the theme would be angry about slavery. Same idea though. Check each answer choice to see which matches the tone and attitude as well as the topic, and that's the correct one. I think I'm actually going to skip this one for the sake of time. It's similar to the previous one. Same sort of idea. Last question type is whole passage comprehension. And for whole passage comprehension questions, you need to identify something that is present throughout the passage, throughout the entire passage. It's similar to basic comprehension, except that you're looking everywhere instead of just in one specific area. You can identify them because it asks you about something that happens throughout the passage or about what the author says throughout the passage. You're going to use your understanding of the passage to locate evidence that's relevant to what the question is asking. Your active reading, right? You're going to match the evidence with the answer choices, and you're going to choose the answer choice that fits all of the evidence in multiple parts of the passage, right? Not just something that's mentioned one time in one little specific area. Throughout the passage, the writer equates human rights with all of the following except what? So this is a passage we've already looked at. Sorry, I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to try this question first, and then I will jump in. So do your best here. Pause when you're done. Okay. Throughout the passage, the writer equates human rights with all of the following except what? So let's just kind of see all the places where they talk about human rights here. So I've chosen to discuss it here. Liberty, equality, fraternity. That is kind of important, right? Because they're talking about how it's an example of the roots of human freedom being done in Spain, so maybe that's relevant. We must not be confused about what freedom is. Basic human rights are simple and easily understood: freedom of speech and a free press, freedom of religion and worship, freedom of assembly and the right to petition, the right of men to be secure in their homes and free from unreasonable search and seizure, and from arbitrary arrest and punishment. That's definitely important. There are basic differences that show up even in the use of words between a democratic and totalitarian country. For instance, democracy means one thing. The USSR representatives assert they already have achieved many things we cannot achieve. They would say that people in the USSR control their government by allowing their government to have certain absolute rights. We, on the other hand, feel that certain rights can never be granted to the government, but must be kept in the hands of the people. The right to work. The Soviet Union insists that this is a basic right, which it alone can guarantee because it alone provides full employment by the government. But the right to work in the Soviet Union remains the assignment of workers to do whatever the task given. without an opportunity for the people to participate in the decision of what the government should do. We in the United States have come to realize it means the freedom to choose one's job, to work or to not work as one desires. So that's related to human rights, right? The right to work and the different definitions of it. The right of choice would seem to us an important fundamental freedom. The place to discuss the issue of human rights is in the form of the United Nations. And yeah, okay. Those are kind of all the places it talks about rights and human rights. Throughout the passage, the writer equates human rights with all the following except what? Let's see. So the writer equates human rights with all the following except what? Employment for all. Yeah, they do. It talks about the right to work. It talks about, well, yes and no, right? It talks about how that's considered a right in the USSR, but it has a different definition here in the United States. So yes and no. Let's hold on to that for now. Let's see what our other options are. Throughout the passage, the writer equates human rights with all the following except B, freedom. Well, that's definitely equated, right? Over here when it talks about human freedom. So that's definitely not correct. The United States Bill of Rights, I don't remember that coming up at all. So that could be the correct answer here. I don't think it mentions the Bill of Rights anywhere in here. Let me just double check. Yeah, it doesn't. So that is looking like the correct answer. D, democracy. No, it talks about democracy in here. And how it has different meanings. And financial assistance to the poor. Yeah, that's also mentioned as well in this example between the United States and the USSR. So yeah, I think C is going to be the correct answer here. My answer key says A, but I think I just mistyped it. Pretty sure I just mistyped it. Because it doesn't mention the United States Bill of Rights at all in this entire passage, right? I'm not missing anything. I just want to double check. Yeah, I don't see it anywhere. Yeah, okay. Yeah, C is correct. And that's how whole comprehension works. So, some takeaways. For all, and these apply to all reading question types, right? Obviously, we have specific methods for each of them, and if you need a refresher on that, you can rewind to that section of the video. For all reading questions, though, there are some things we want to keep in mind. Answers should be chosen based on specific evidence from the passage. Choosing an answer choice that feels right without revisiting the passage is the easiest way to make mistakes. The answers come from the passage. Find the evidence, match it with an answer choice. If the question mentions a specific area or areas of the passage, make sure you look for evidence in that area or in those areas. If it doesn't, you can use the map from active reading to find where the evidence is most likely to be found. Make sure every component of the answer choice that you choose is correct and is supported by evidence from the passage. If there is a portion of the answer choice that is incorrect or is not related to the passage, or is not related to the question, the answer choice is not correct. And use process of elimination to narrow down the options before selecting an answer choice. Sorry that this video went on a little bit long, but we did fit all the information in, and I guess that's the important part here. In the next lesson, lesson 6, the final lesson, we will talk about writing passages and writing questions, which is the other half of the multiple choice section. Thank you for spending the time to watch this and metaphorically hang out with me, and I'll see you guys in the next lesson.